Story 1. I used to rent a room above a funeral home in Des Moines, Iowa. Not because I'm some weirdo, but because it was cheap and close to work. The owners lived out in the suburbs, and the funeral home itself was this two-story brick building with squeaky stairs and a weird draft that smelled like old flowers no matter what time of year it was. I worked the nights at a gas station back then, so I'd usually get home around 3 a.m. and just collapse on my mattress. But every Thursday, the florist delivered arrangements for weekend services, and if I happened to be home, they'd sometimes ask me to help bring them in so they didn't have to wait for the director to show up. It was usually harmless, just carrying wreaths through the back hallway, past the embalming room, and into the chapel where the bodies were laid out. I didn't think much of it after a while. One morning around 7 a.m., I was trying to sleep when the delivery driver banged on the back door so hard it rattled the floor vents. I pulled on sweatpants and went down to help, hoping it would get them out of there faster so I could go back to bed. The driver was a scrawny dude with a big smile, and he handed me this massive white arrangement that smelled like lilies and wet foam. "Just prop it near the front," he said, already turning back to his van. I was alone in the back hallway, balancing the flowers, when I noticed the chapel doors were open. There was one casket near the front, closed, and another near the side, cracked open just enough that I could see the lace lining. It felt colder than usual, and the lights weren't fully on, just those low amber sconces that made everything look like it was filmed in sepia. I put the arrangement down near the front and turned to leave, but something made me stop. I don't know if it was a draft or what, but the curtain behind the side casket moved, like someone brushed past it from the inside. It wasn't much, just a soft sway, but it froze me. I stared at it, telling myself it was nothing, probably the air system kicking on. Then I heard it, a woman's voice, soft, like she was trying to keep from crying. She said, "Is that for me?" It was so quiet I thought I imagined it. I stood there holding my breath, waiting for something else. Anything to prove it was a radio in the office, or maybe a visitor I hadn't seen. But the chapel was empty except for me, the flowers, and the caskets. I backed up, bumping the arrangement so hard it almost tipped over. The voice came again, closer this time, like someone was right on the other side of that curtain. "Is that for me?" I couldn't move. I couldn't even blink. My ears started ringing, and it felt like my chest was being squeezed. I could see the curtain moving again, like a hand was pushing against it from the inside, the fabric pulling outward just a little, like a slow breath. I wanted to run, but I couldn't turn away from it. Then the curtain snapped open, like someone yanked it hard from the inside. There was nothing there, just darkness behind it, but it was cold, like stepping into a freezer, and it smelled like dirt and old water. I swear to you, I saw the edge of a hand, pale with long, thin fingers, pull back into the darkness. Just for a second, before the curtain fell back into place. That was it for me. I don't even remember getting back upstairs. I don't remember the stairs or locking the apartment door or falling against my mattress, shaking so hard I almost threw up. I stayed under the blankets for hours, trying to convince myself it was a stress dream or that I was overtired from the night shift. But when I finally went downstairs to grab my phone, the flowers I brought in were gone. I checked with the director later, trying to sound casual, and he said the flowers had been moved because they were blocking the aisle. He didn't mention the curtain or the voice or the freezing cold that followed me up the stairs that morning. I moved out a month later, didn't even finish my lease. Story 2. I live in a town you've probably never heard of, a place wedged between endless fields and cracked county roads in southern Illinois. It's the kind of town that smells like burning leaves in the fall and rotting corn in the spring. I've worked as a motor vehicle collision analyst here for almost 12 years. I reconstruct how people die in car wrecks. It's not a job you plan to have as a kid. You just sort of end up there, if you've got a strong stomach and no better ideas. It was late October when it happened, right around that time when the wind starts to bite harder at night and you realize the long winter's not far off. I was at home changing the oil in my truck when the call came through. Fatality on Route 27, shallow S-curve just past the old mill. I wiped my hands on a rag and drove out without saying much to my wife, figuring it would be another late one. By the time I got there, the sheriff had already taped off the scene, blue lights flashing across the fields. A single vehicle, a beat-up Toyota Corolla, was resting about 30 feet off the road, upside down in a ditch. I parked behind the ambulance that wasn't in any hurry to leave. When you work wrecks like this, you can tell if someone's alive before you even step out of the truck. The girl, early 20s, had been thrown clear during the roll. No seatbelt. Rookie mistake. Her body lay face down in the dirt, one arm twisted underneath her like a broken doll. When I got closer, I realized she was actually on her back. It was just that half her skull was missing. Her brain was everywhere, splattered along the roadway, matted into the grass, even chunks wedged in the cracked windshield. I've seen a lot, more than most ever should, but this one stopped me cold for a second. The fracture ran from her left eye socket clean across to the back of her head, splitting her almost neatly in two. You could see the hollow cavity inside where the brain had been. Her eyes were still open, staring at nothing. The whole scene stank of hot metal, ruptured fluids, and something else. That greasy, nauseating smell of blood baked by the sun. I shook it off, took photos, walked the debris field. I was fascinated in a way. The mechanics of death. How the physics of a single mistake tear a human body apart. After a few hours, once we'd bagged her up and the wrecker hauled off what was left of her car, I stood by my truck to fill out the preliminary report. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was my wife. "Hey," she said, all cheerful. "You almost done?" "Almost. Rough one," I muttered, glancing back at the blood-stained road. "Well, don't be too late," she said. "Remember? Pumpkin carving night with the kids. They're so excited." I didn't answer at first, just stood there, staring at the smears drying black on the pavement. All I could think about was the way her brain had looked. Soft, crumbled, glistening. I swallowed hard, promised I'd be home soon, hung up. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the sun was long down. My boys were already at the table, grinning wide, their pumpkins lined up in front of them. My wife handed me a knife and kissed my cheek. "You okay?" she asked. "Fine," I lied. I sat down, staring at the pumpkin. Orange, round, solid. The flesh was tough when I drove the knife in, and the sound it made, a wet, fibrous rip, turned my stomach. I tried not to think about the scene from earlier, tried to ignore how the texture under my hands felt wrong, too close to the sensation of picking up the brain matter off the road. I managed to carve a crooked mouth before I had to excuse myself. Locked myself in the bathroom and sat on the edge of the tub, breathing hard. I didn't carve another pumpkin that year, or the year after. In fact, I haven't carved one since. Story 3. I never planned to end up working in a morgue in Ciudad Juarez. I was 26, needed a job after getting kicked out of my uncle's auto shop, and a cousin said they needed help cleaning up and bagging bodies. "It's easy work," he told me. "Just don't think about it." That's the thing, though. You can't help but think about it, especially when you're by yourself at 2 in the morning, mopping up blood trails. The air heavy with that smell that sticks in your clothes and hair. It's like iron mixed with old earth. You learn to ignore the faces, the bullet holes, the swollen tongues, and you learn to keep your mouth shut, especially when the federales or the cartel people drop bodies off. I don't tell many people this story. I don't like how it sounds even in my head, and it's worse when I say it out loud. But you asked, so here it is. This was in the middle of the summer. It was one of those weeks where the heat never let up, even at night, and it felt like the whole city was waiting for something bad to happen. There had been a shootout between the cartel and the federales that afternoon. It was a mess, 11 dead, and I heard there were more hurt. We were told to expect the bodies that night, and they rolled in around 10 p.m., wrapped in black plastic, blood soaking through in dark patches. One of the federal officers told us to keep the bodies safe, that the cartel might want them back, and that we'd have a guard posted all night. The guy they posted was a squad commander, a big man with a thick mustache and a scar under his left eye. He nodded at me once and didn't say much else, just took his post near the double doors that led to the overflow room, where we were laying out the bodies until we could get them into the cooler. The cooler was almost full, but I made space, moving old bodies down, shifting the racks, trying not to think about the sticky noises the bags made as I dragged them. It took me a while, and by the time I finished, it was past 2 a.m. I was sweating through my scrubs, exhausted, hungry, just wanting to get out. When I pushed the last rack in, I looked through the rectangle windows in the double doors, and I could see the commander standing there, arms behind his back, chin up, like he was inspecting us. I remember thinking it was weird he was there because there was nothing to see, and the hallway he was in didn't even have a window to the outside. I figured maybe he was just trying to look tough or something. I wiped my face, pushed the door open, and stepped into the hallway. "Listo," I told him. "Ready." But he was gone. I mean, just gone. One second he was there, and the next, it was an empty hallway, the light flickering above the doors, the hum of the cooler behind me. I stood there for a second, too tired to process it, then told myself I was imagining things, that I was overworked, that it was the heat, whatever. I grabbed my backpack and walked outside to the parking lot, and there was the patrol truck, lights off, engine idling to keep the AC running. I walked over and tapped on the window, and the commander rolled it down. He looked at me confused. "Por qué saliste de repente?" I asked him. "I thought you were watching the hallway." He frowned. "Sir, I've been out here all night. I never went inside." I remember the way my stomach dropped when he said that. I looked back at the building, the dark windows, the single light over the door buzzing with bugs. I felt like something cold crawled down my spine, even in that heat. I said, "There was someone standing in the hallway, right outside the cooler doors." He got out of the truck. We both stood there looking at the building, then at each other, neither of us wanting to say it, but we both knew. Without saying a word, we went back inside together. The hallway was empty, the lights buzzing, the smell hitting us as we stepped back in. I unlocked the cooler, and as the door swung open, the cold air rushed out, making a cloud in the hallway. And there he was, the upper half of the squad commander, standing in the cooler, right above the black bags. No legs, nothing from the waist down, just floating there, chin up, hands behind his back, the same scar under his left eye. His eyes were open, looking straight ahead, like he was still guarding the bodies. I don't remember dropping my flashlight, but I did. It rolled and hit one of the racks, and the clatter echoed in that concrete room. The commander next to me whispered, "Madre de Dios," and crossed himself. The thing inside turned its head toward us, slow, like it was underwater. And I swear to you, I saw its mouth move like it was trying to speak, but there was no sound, just this low, humming vibration that made the cooler racks shake. I don't know how long we stood there. It couldn't have been more than a few seconds, but it felt like forever. And then it just started to fade, like smoke in the wind, until it was gone, leaving nothing behind but the cold air and the dead. The commander backed out of the room, breathing hard, his hand on his holster. I turned off the cooler light and shut the door, and we stood in the hallway, neither of us saying anything. He left after that, and I sat on the curb outside until the sun came up, not wanting to go back in there, not even to get my backpack. I didn't last much longer at that job. I started seeing that hallway in my dreams, seeing that floating torso, hearing that humming noise whenever I closed my eyes. I told my cousin I was done, and I left Juarez a month later. I don't know what that was. Maybe it was the commander's spirit, maybe it was something else. I don't know. All I know is that it felt like he died protecting his men, and he wasn't done, even in death. Maybe some deaths are too big to leave behind, even when you're gone. I don't care what people think when I tell them this. It happened, and I saw it, and I still see it sometimes when I walk past refrigerated doors or hear that buzz of fluorescent lights. If you ever work in a morgue, just know there are some things in there that don't stay dead, and sometimes they're just doing their job, even when there's nothing left of them to stand on. Story 4. I'm Evan, and I used to work at Fairhaven Mortuary, just outside of Boise, Idaho. I don't usually talk about this. People either don't believe you or they believe you too much, and then you're stuck living it all over again while they stare at you like you've got something crawling under your skin. It was late October when it happened. Cold enough that the floor tiles in the prep room had that sharp kind of chill that gets into your bones. I was working alone that night. Our lead embalmer, Rick, had taken the night off, and we were between shifts. Quiet night, or at least it was supposed to be. We had a viewing scheduled for a man named Walter Pratt, 60s, heart failure, standard case. His family wanted an open casket viewing, just a couple of hours so the grandkids could say goodbye. Walter had no teeth, full dentures, but the family didn't want them in. Said he never liked wearing them, even when he was alive. Now, if you know anything about mortuary work, you know that a body's jaw doesn't stay shut naturally. Gravity works against you. We usually use something called a mouth former, a plastic device that holds everything together, keeps things looking peaceful. Rick had set Walter up earlier in the day, secured everything, dressed him, made him look good. I double-checked before the family came in. He looked fine. His mouth was shut, hands folded over his chest, like a painting almost. The viewing started at 6. About a dozen family members, mostly quiet, some crying. I stayed out of the way like we're supposed to, posted at the back of the room. 30 minutes in, I noticed something strange. There was this low creaking noise, real soft. I thought maybe it was the cooling vents kicking on. I looked up at the casket. That's when I saw it. Walter's mouth started to open, slowly like someone struggling to yawn underwater. It wasn't sudden, it was deliberate. His jaw unhinged further and further until it hung wide open. The angle was all wrong. It looked like he was trying to scream but couldn't. His tongue was stiff, swollen, poking out just slightly, and I swear to God, for half a second, it looked like it twitched. I moved fast. I told the family there was a minor issue and that they needed to step out for a moment. Most of them didn't even notice at first. The lighting was dim, and people were too caught up in their grief. I ushered them into the lobby, heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. Back inside, I tried to fix it. I grabbed a small tube of mortuary-grade adhesive we kept on hand. Basically, super glue for emergencies like this. I pressed Walter's lips shut and held them, counting out 30 seconds. When I let go, they stayed closed for about 2 heartbeats. Then, without warning, his lips pulled apart again with a wet pop, wider this time, and his head lolled to the side like he was trying to look at me. His gums were black and shriveled inside, and that same awful twitch jerked his tongue again. "No," I said out loud, backing away. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the glue. There was no way, no natural way, that could happen. Rigor mortis was long past. Walter should have been stiff, inert, nothing but dead weight. But he wasn't. It was like something inside him was moving. I panicked. I called over to Millstone Mortuary 2 streets down. Gerald was their embalmer on call that night. I told him, "I need you here. Now emergency." I must have sounded crazed because he didn't even ask questions. He said he was on his way. While I waited, I didn't go near the casket. I just stood by the door and watched. And Walter? He didn't stop. His mouth kept twitching wider, stretching the corners of his lips until the skin around them began to crack. His neck muscles flexed and twisted. His hands, folded so neatly across his chest, started to tremble, the fingertips tapping against each other in these uneven, jerky spasms. It wasn't rhythmic, like nerve settling. It was erratic, intentional. The worst part, I could hear these faint, moist clicking noises coming from his throat, like he was trying to force something out but didn't have the air or the lungs to do it. By the time Gerald showed up, I was practically hyperventilating. He didn't say a word when he saw Walter, just grabbed his embalming kit, pulled out a heavy needle and thick black suture thread, and told me to hold the jaw steady. "Don't look at him," Gerald said while threading the needle through Walter's jaw, from under his chin and straight up through his gums into his palate. "Just hold him." I tried not to, but my eyes flickered to Walter's face once. Just once. His eyelids were trembling, like someone having a nightmare. After sewing the mouth shut tight, Gerald wiped the sweat from his forehead and said, "Burn that mouth former. Don't reuse it. Sometimes they bring something back with them." I stared at him, stunned. "What the hell are you talking about?" Gerald just packed up his kit without answering and left. Fast. The family came back in after we straightened everything out. None of them seemed to notice that the stitches inside Walter's mouth were now barely concealed. They said their goodbyes. The night ended like nothing had ever happened. Story 5. I never planned on working in a morgue. I needed a job after dropping out of college, and my uncle said the county morgue in Bakersfield needed help with filing and cleaning up. It paid better than grocery stores, so I took it, thinking it'd be quiet, just dead people. No drama. The building itself was old, the kind with yellowed tiles and buzzing fluorescent lights. It always smelled like bleach and something else under it, like wet cardboard. I didn't deal with the bodies. I mostly cleaned the hallways, took out biohazard trash, and handled paperwork upstairs, where the file cabinets were crammed with manila folders of people who used to breathe. I'd been there about 6 months when this happened. It was around 10 p.m. on a Thursday, the last shift before my 2 days off. My supervisor, Glenn, had already left, telling me, "Lock up when you're done." I remember thinking about the jack-in-the-box I'd grab on the way home. The morgue was dead silent, pun not intended. You could hear the hum of the freezers below, a dull, low vibration that you felt in your legs if you stood still long enough. I was upstairs going through a stack of folders that had to be reorganized by date of death. The folders smelled like dust and glue. It was a mind-numbing task, but I liked it because it kept me away from the cold room where the bodies were zipped up. That's when I saw it. My last name, handwritten in black marker, on a faded folder in the middle of the stack. I froze. I thought maybe it was my uncle's or something, but when I pulled it out, it had my dad's full name on it. He died of a heart attack when I was 15, and I hadn't even thought about the fact he'd passed through this place until that second. My hand started shaking, and I almost dropped the folder. I don't know what made me open it, but I did. Inside there were the intake forms, the personal effects inventory, and the coroner's notes with the time of death circled in red pen. I just stood there, reading that cold, mechanical language about how they found him, what they did to him, the weight of his organs. I didn't hear anything, but I felt it. The air in the room just shifted, like it got heavier, like something was pressing down on my shoulders. The fluorescent light above me flickered once, and I remember thinking, "Don't go out now." I put the folder back and turned to close the cabinet, but the door to the file room slammed shut so hard the glass rattled. There was no wind, no windows open. I knew the air vent in that room was broken, and the door had never slammed shut on its own before. I just stood there, staring at the door, my heart hammering so hard I felt it in my teeth. I told myself it was an air pressure thing, or the building settling, or something rational, but I didn't believe it. Then there was this sound. It was soft at first, like a dragging shuffle on the linoleum floor outside the door. Then it stopped right on the other side. I was too scared to breathe. I whispered, "Glenn?" Even though I knew he wasn't there. Nothing. Then slow as hell, the doorknob started turning, squeaking just a bit, and I felt like my skin was too tight on my body. I backed up, hit the file cabinet, and papers slid onto the floor. I whispered, "Stop," like an idiot, like that would do anything. The knob stopped moving, and I thought, it's over. But then it twisted again, and the door cracked open an inch. Just an inch. Enough for the hallway light to spill into the dark room, and enough for me to see out. There was no one there, but there was a shadow across the hallway floor, long and thin, like someone was standing just out of sight to the left of the doorway. I couldn't see a head or legs, just that shadow, hovering, shifting like it was breathing. I wanted to move. I couldn't. My body locked up like it wasn't mine. My eyes started to water, and I felt my bladder threaten to give out. Then the air got colder, and I smelled something I will never forget. It wasn't bleach, it wasn't decay, it wasn't even blood. It was like wet, rotting earth, like a grave that's been disturbed. The shadow started to move, slow, gliding across the hallway, but nothing made it. Nothing was there to cast it. It just moved across the floor and stopped in front of the door. Then for a second I heard my dad's voice. I swear on everything, it was his voice. It sounded like it came from right in front of me, but also like it was coming from inside my head. He just said, "Don't." That was it. Just that word, clear as day, the way he used to say it when I was about to do something stupid. Then the door slammed shut again, rattling the walls. The light flickered once, then went steady. The shadow was gone. I was breathing so hard I thought I was going to pass out. I ran to the door, pulled it open, and the hallway was empty. Dead silent, nothing there. The smell was gone. I left everything on the floor and ran out, didn't even lock up. I sat in my car in the lot, shaking, for 20 minutes before I could drive home. I quit the next day over the phone. Glenn didn't even ask why. He just sighed and said, "Yeah, I get it." I don't talk about this because I don't care who believes it or not. I don't know if it was my dad, or if I was losing my mind, or if something else in that building used his voice to tell me to leave it alone. All I know is I won't step foot in a morgue again, and I sure as hell won't open any folder with my family's name on it ever again. Story 6. I grew up in western Pennsylvania, in a town where the roads curled like question marks around old coal shafts, and families stayed in the same house for 3 generations. I work in pathology now, but back when I was 13, my best friend Jason lived with his family in a funeral home. Not near one, in one. Their apartment was right above the viewing rooms and embalming area. The whole building smelled like lemon cleaner and wood polish, always cold no matter what time of year. Jason and I were inseparable. We'd spend our afternoons after school exploring places we weren't supposed to. Storage rooms, the flower prep area, even the cold chamber where they kept the bodies before embalming. We were stupid kids and thought we were invincible. We'd dare each other to touch the toe tags. I know how that sounds, but you spend enough time around death, you either get used to it or you break. There was this one Saturday. We were bored out of our minds, and Jason's parents had gone out to pick up dinner. That left the two of us unsupervised in a place no two kids should ever be alone. "You want to play hide and seek?" he said, holding a flashlight under his chin like he was telling a ghost story. "In the casket showroom?" That was where they kept the display caskets, lined up like cars in a showroom. Some open, some closed, some half-lidded so families could see the interiors. I hesitated. I didn't really want to climb into one, but Jason always had the upper hand, and I wasn't about to back out. We agreed on the rules. 2-minute countdown. You had to stay in the showroom, and if you made a noise, you lost. Jason counted first. I slid into one of the half-lid models near the back. It was lined in this itchy off-white fabric, and it smelled like plastic and carpet glue. I shut the lid partway and waited. You can't imagine the kind of silence in a place like that. It's thick. You hear your own heartbeat. You start noticing every creak and shift in the building. But I was used to that. What I wasn't used to was hearing a breath. Not mine. At first, I thought it was Jason messing with me, but it didn't sound close. It sounded like it was coming from across the room, like a slow, uneven wheeze. Inhale, pause, exhale. The kind of sound an old man makes after climbing stairs. Then a shift, a creak like wood under pressure. Another lid opening? I waited, holding my breath. The sound came again. Creak. And then the unmistakable clunk of a lid being moved into place. I wanted to bolt up, but I kept telling myself it was Jason, that he was trying to scare me. I'd scare him back. But then I heard his voice. "Dude," he whispered behind me. "Where are you? I can't find you." He wasn't in the room. I could tell by the way his voice carried. He was still near the doorway, which meant whoever, or whatever, had opened a casket. It wasn't him. The breathing was closer now. I started to push the lid open. It wouldn't budge. I pushed harder, but it felt like something was sitting on it. I didn't yell. I don't know why. I think part of me thought if I stayed quiet, it'd go away, but it didn't. I heard something slide across the carpet, then tap on the lid above me, like a knuckle tapping once. Then again, tap. Then it dragged. A slow, scraping drag across the lid of the casket I was inside. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I could feel it above me. Then it spoke. Not loudly, just a whisper. "Wrong one." I kicked the lid, hard. It cracked open a few inches, just enough for me to wedge my fingers into the gap and shove it the rest of the way. I rolled out, hit the floor hard, scrambled to my feet, and the room was empty. No one. Every casket was closed. Jason came in a few seconds later, confused. "Dude, what happened? Why were you banging around?" I couldn't speak. I just pointed. He looked around annoyed. "You broke that lid, man. My dad's gonna be pissed." I told him what I heard. I expected him to laugh, to tell me I was full of it, but he didn't. He just got real quiet. Then he said something I still think about. "They brought in a transfer this morning, from that place in Monroeville, but he was in a sealed body bag. Still is, I think." He checked his phone. His parents weren't due back for another 30 minutes. We went down to the prep room. I wish we hadn't. The body bag on the gurney was zipped up, but the zipper was wet, like someone had been sucking on the metal. There were streaks on the inside of the vinyl. Long, greasy handprints, like something had tried to push out. Jason touched the bag gently, then jumped back. "It's cold, but not body cold, like it just got put back." We backed out of that room and didn't go back in. When his parents came home, we didn't say anything. What were we supposed to say? The next day, that transfer was gone. No service, no obituary, no paperwork, just gone. Story 7. I grew up in eastern Kentucky, in one of those towns where everyone knows who you are, what you did last Saturday, and what you'll probably do next weekend too. Back then, I was 17, crashing at my best friend Missy's house most weekends, because her mom owned the only flower shop in town, and her dad ran the hardware store next door. Missy's mom, Teresa, was one of those women who never forgot a birthday, a funeral, or who owed her $50. She was gone that weekend at her sister's place, left Missy in charge of feeding the shop cats and keeping the fridge stocked with Diet Coke. It was the start of July, sticky and loud with cicadas. And I remember we were halfway through a VHS marathon when Teresa called. Missy put her on speaker. I could hear traffic in the background, and her voice was sharp with panic. "I left Mr. Acker's photo in the cooler, "It has to go to the funeral home tonight, miss. The service is first thing in the morning. If you two don't mind." Of course we minded, but it wasn't really a question. The funeral home was about 3 miles out on a 2-lane road that cut through cornfields and ended in a cluster of old white houses. I'd only been in there once when my great-uncle died. I didn't like how cold the halls were, how the rugs smelled like floor polish and wilted lilies. We drove Missy's old Civic out there, acting tougher than we felt. She kept laughing like it was all a big joke, but her hands were tight on the wheel. I just held that stupid gold-frame photo of Mr. Acker on my knees like it might try to bite me. He'd been dead 3 days, small town, so we'd both seen him in church a million times. It was maybe 10:30 when we pulled up. The parking lot was empty except for the director's Buick parked off to the side. The porch light was on, but the rest of the building was dark. Missy killed the engine and looked at me. "Come on," she said. "You're not making me do this alone." Inside, it smelled like carnations and something sour under it. The front doors were unlocked, which didn't feel right, but Missy said the director always left them open late when there was an early morning service. We stepped in and our sneakers squeaked on the tile. Missy knew the place better than I did. She led us down the hall toward the viewing room. There were flower stands everywhere, half-finished wreaths, buckets of leftover stems. The air felt too heavy, like the building was breathing slow under the hum of those old fluorescent lights. Mr. Acker was in an open casket at the far end. He looked small, shrunk. I tried not to stare, but it's hard not to when you're standing in a room alone with a dead man at 11 at night. Missy whispered, "Hold the picture. I'm going to put it on that stand behind him." She stepped up to the casket, careful not to bump the edge. I stood back by the doorway, wishing I'd waited in the car. I remember how she reached out, balanced the frame on a hook behind his head. And I swear on my mother's grave, when she leaned forward, I heard this sound. It wasn't loud, just this slow, raspy draw of air, like when you drag an old door open. But it didn't come from the door. It came from Mr. Acker. Missy froze. Her shoulders jerked up and she turned, eyes wide. "Did you?" Before she got the words out, he did it again. A longer hiss this time, like he was sucking the whole room into his lungs. His chest didn't move. Nothing moved. But the noise came straight from his mouth. Missy screamed. I think I did too, but it's like I can't remember my own voice in that second. She spun around, knocked the flower stand into the casket, and the whole thing rattled like a shopping cart hitting a curb. We didn't look back. We didn't fix the flowers. We just bolted down that hallway, tripping over the rug, slamming through the front door so hard the handle smacked the wall. She dropped the keys trying to unlock the car. Kept saying, "He breathed. He breathed." Over and over while I stomped my foot on the gas pedal like that would make the engine turn faster. When we got back to her house, neither of us said anything. We just sat in the car, doors locked, waiting for her mom to call again. But Teresa never asked about it later. The photo was there in the funeral slideshow the next morning like nothing ever happened. I still don't know what I heard. Maybe air trapped in his lungs? Maybe the casket shifted? Or maybe dead men can take one last breath when you're dumb enough to stand close enough to hear it. I don't go to funerals if I can help it now, and I don't ever volunteer to drop anything off at the parlor after dark. Story 8. People always assume the scariest part of working around the dead is the bodies themselves. It's not. You get used to them. The silence, the smell, the weight. What you don't get used to is when something moves that shouldn't, especially when you're alone, especially at 3 a.m. My name's Ray. I live just outside of Knoxville, Tennessee, and back in 2017, I was working nights for a small, family-owned funeral home. Nothing fancy. We handled the pickups, prep, arrangements, sometimes even drove out for midnight calls when someone passed at home. It was mostly peaceful, quiet work. But there's one night I'll never forget, and I'm not interested in any theories or maybe you were tired comments. I know what I saw, what I felt, what I heard. That night I was on call. I remember I had just settled in for the night, hadn't even taken off my boots yet, when my phone buzzed. Elderly male, passed in his sleep. Natural causes. I jotted down the address, grabbed my coat and hit the road. It was maybe a 30-minute drive. The family was calm when I got there. Grieving, yes, but composed. I did the usual, introduced myself, offered condolences, and gently explained the next steps. The man, Mr. Barlow, had prearranged everything years ago. It was all in order. I moved him respectfully to the stretcher, covered him, and loaded him into the van. By the time I pulled back into the funeral home, it was just after 3 a.m. The lot was dark, and the place looked empty, as it should have. I parked in the back, unlocked the service entrance, and wheeled Mr. Barlow down the corridor. I wasn't rushing. I've never liked rushing with the dead. It feels disrespectful. The cooler is a walk-in unit at the back of the prep area. Steel door, reinforced, heavy as hell. It hums constantly, and when it clicks shut, it seals. I eased Mr. Barlow inside, checked the temp, logged the time, and stood there for a second. Don't ask me why. I just did. Maybe it was the quiet. Maybe it was habit. Then I felt it, like someone watching me. Not from inside the cooler, no. Behind me. I turned quick. Nothing. Just the prep room. Sterile counters, steel table, embalming station. Dead quiet as usual. But something felt wrong. The air had that weight, like before a thunderstorm. It made the hairs on my neck stand straight up. I shook it off, locked the cooler. I was moving toward the front, getting ready to set the alarm when... Bang! The cooler door slammed, not closed, open, then slammed shut, like someone had yanked it wide and shoved it back hard. I froze. My heart just stopped. That door doesn't swing like that. It's heavy. It doesn't move without force. And I know I shut it. I locked it. I turned slowly, almost not wanting to look. Nothing. No one. I took a shaky breath, walked back toward the cooler, and just stared at the door. Still sealed. No one inside but Mr. Barlow. I didn't open it again. I couldn't. I backed up. Slowly, not taking my eyes off that door. I hit the alarm and bolted out through the service entrance. I didn't even turn the lights off. I sat in my car, shaking, staring at the building. For the first time in years of doing this job, I didn't want to go back in. Not now. Maybe not ever. I didn't sleep when I got home. I didn't even change out of my uniform. I just sat in my living room with every light on and waited for the sun to come up. The next morning when the day staff arrived, I came in early. I didn't tell anyone what happened. What was I supposed to say? That the dead man I brought in slammed the cooler door behind me? Later, when we prepped Mr. Barlow for his service, I kept an eye on him. He looked peaceful. Nothing strange, no marks, no weird expression. Just a quiet old man who passed in his sleep. But I swear, as we zipped the suit jacket over him, I caught a faint whiff of something. Not formaldehyde, not disinfectant, something else. Sulfur. That was the last time I ever did a solo drop at 3 a.m. No one ever believed me. My supervisor laughed it off and said it was probably air pressure or fatigue. But that door didn't move from pressure, and I wasn't tired enough to imagine the way that force came from behind me. The way the chill hit my spine right before it slammed. Whatever it was, it waited until I was alone, until the building was still, until the only living soul in there was me. I never forgot that night. Never will. Story 9. I'm a registered nurse at a small hospital in eastern Ohio, about an hour outside of Youngstown. Our ER isn't huge, just 6 beds and a trauma bay, but we see our share of chaos. Drug ODs, car crashes, the occasional stabbing. Nothing really rattles me anymore. I've cleaned brains off gurneys. I've watched people die with their eyes wide open. But what happened 2 years ago with that damn phone? Nothing's unsettled me like that. It was a slow Tuesday when they wheeled him in. Male, mid-40s, no ID. Found unresponsive in a hotel bathroom. Classic overdose. He was already gone by the time EMS got him to us. Pupils fixed. No heartbeat. Maybe dead an hour or so. He had a worn hoodie, jeans, and a cracked Android phone in his pocket. No wallet, no keys, nothing else. We did the usual. Pronounced, tagged, bagged. No family showed. No one called asking for him. The cops came, took a statement, and left the body for transport to the morgue downstairs. But here's where it started. Someone put the guy's phone on the counter in Bay 3. Nobody thought about it after that. That room doesn't get used much unless we're full, and that week was slow. Next day around 2:30 in the afternoon, I'm charting at the nurse's station. All of a sudden I hear this loud, tinny ringtone coming from Bay 3. Not the phone ringing, an alarm going off. That harsh default Android alarm tone, repeating over and over. I walk in, find the phone vibrating face down on the counter. The screen says 2:30 p.m., wake up. I try to silence it, no luck. Lock screen, needs a passcode. I try to shut it off, still won't. It asks for the PIN before powering down. I say weird and drop it back on the counter. Eventually it shuts up. We all kind of laughed about it. But the next day, same thing, exactly 2:30 p.m. That same harsh alarm. Now people are starting to get creeped out. One of the texts, Jamie says, "Why don't you just smash the thing?" But it didn't feel right. I don't know why. Maybe because it belonged to someone who died right there in our care. Maybe because it felt intentional. Day 3, same alarm, same time. The phone won't die. We never charged it. No one touched it. But every day at 2:30 p.m., it came alive. The screen lit up. The sound echoed down the hall. On day 4, I was in the medroom when it went off. Even from behind a closed door, I heard it. That room's locked, by the way. Double code access. Someone had tossed the phone in there the night before to shut it up, but it didn't help. "You're telling me this phone's been on for 4 days without charging?" our charge nurse asked. "Battery must be shot by now," I said. "But nope, still going." She rolled her eyes, but she was scared. We all were. On day 5, I stayed close to bay 3, waiting. I wanted to see if maybe someone was pranking us. Maybe one of the night shift nurses was messing around. But no. 2:30 p.m. sharp, the alarm goes off. No warning. Just beep, beep, beep. Over and over. I grabbed the phone, turned it over, and stared at the screen. Same message. 2:30 p.m. Wake up. And then, I swear to God, it flashed. Not a light, not a screen glitch. Just something. A flicker. The screen glitched black, then lit up again, but just for a second. And then the screen showed the camera view, like someone had turned it on from the inside, like it was filming me. I dropped it. Jamie heard it hit the ground and came running. I said nothing, just picked it up and walked it into the supply closet. I wrapped it in a towel, shoved it in a drawer, and slammed it shut. Day 6, 2:30 p.m. The drawer starts vibrating, loud, even louder than before. I open it. The phone's screen is on, still wrapped in the towel, still flashing, "Wake up." That time I lost it. I walked the phone down to security, told them to do something with it. Toss it, destroy it, bury it. I didn't care. They logged it as unclaimed property and moved it to the evidence locker next to the morgue. I didn't ask any more questions. Next day it was quiet. 2:30 came and went. No alarm, no vibration, just silence. But then, 2 hours later, Jamie paged me from the stairwell. "I think you need to see this," she said. The stairwell connects the ER to the morgue level. No one uses it except for staff, usually just transporters moving bodies. I met her halfway down. She didn't say anything, just pointed. There at the bottom of the steps was the phone, just sitting on the tile floor. No cracks, no scratches, screen still lit, 2:30 alarm message still visible, but it was 4:45 p.m. "I didn't touch it," she said, backing away. "It was just there." We both stared at it. Then I noticed something else. Wet footprints, leading away from it. Not bloody, not dirty, just wet. Like someone walked out of the cooler barefoot and left a trail. There was no one else on that floor. We checked every room. The morgue was locked. The cameras, offline. All of them. I quit a month later, not because of the phone officially, but I didn't want to wait for 2:30 again. Whatever was tied to that phone, it didn't want to be forgotten. And it sure as hell didn't want to stay dead. I've never told this story before. Not all of it. People would say I'm making it up, but I still check my phone every day at 2:30, just to make sure it's only mine that's ringing. Just to make sure it's not coming from somewhere else, somewhere below.